Hello, everyone. My name is Colton Bernasol. I'm the managing editor for The Bias, and I am here today to talk with the Reverend Hazel Joyce Salatan, who's a pastor at St. John's United Methodist Church in Illinois, and she is a PhD student in Christian education and congregational studies at Garrett Evangelical Theological Seminary. She's also a colleague of mine. So we're here to talk with her about her forthcoming essay, The Justice and Hope of the Salakot, in our first ever print issue of The Bias magazine, The Radical Hope. Hi, Hazel. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Hi, Colton. Thank you for having me, and congratulations in your first edition.
Thank you so much. We're really excited about it, and we're really excited about your essay in particular. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the Salakot Chapel at Union Theological Seminary. What is the Salakot, and what's the relationship between the chapel and the local farming communities in the Philippines?
So the salakot is a traditional woven hat used by farmers in the Philippines. It protects them from the sun or rain while they work. But it also carries deeper meaning. It represents their labor, dignity, and connection to the land. In fact, I want to show you something. I brought the salakot with me from the
Wow.
Philippines. So here. So when I first stepped into the Salakot Chapel at Union Theological Seminary, Philippines, it struck me right away that this wasn't just a design choice. The chapel is shaped and named after something that belongs to farmers. And that says something really powerful. For over a century, the seminary has been intentionally rooting theology in the lives of ordinary people, especially those who work the land, and continues to do so today. And the chapel itself reflects that. It's open, it's communal, and it doesn't separate worship from everyday life. So I say there's this strong relationship where the seminary is constantly being pointed back to the farming communities, not just as subjects of study, but as people who shape how theology is understood and practiced. So in that sense, I believe that the Salakot Chapel doesn't just represent the farmers. It calls us to learn from them.
In your essay, you write about a particular farm community, and that's the community of Lupang Ramos. Now, I had the opportunity to travel to Lupang Ramos this past January, and one of the things that I noticed is that this farm community is surrounded by a lot of urban development. Can you help paint a picture of Lupang Ramos? What are the challenges that this farm community is facing?
Lupang Ramos is a farming community that exists in the middle of rapid urban development. You're correct. So you see cultivated land and people working the fields, but surrounding it are expanding infrastructures and economic pressures that are slowly closing in. The land itself is contested, which means the farmers don't have full security over it. There's always a possibility of displacement, and that creates a constant sense of uncertainty. Their harvest can be disrupted, their livelihoods threatened, and their future on the land is never guaranteed. So this is currently happening to them. They face ongoing pressures and threats from the military, government officials who are supposed to protect them, and private companies seeking to take the land from them. And yet what stayed with me is how deeply their life together is. How deeply rooted their life together is. They gather for worship on Sundays. They make decisions collectively as a community. They practice communal farming. They look out for each other, protecting their women and children. And they continue to stand their ground to protect the land and to fight for their right to remain on it, not only for themselves, but for all of us who are sustained by their labor. For every table that is nourished by the harvest, they refuse to surrender. For me, Lupang Ramos is not only a place of struggle, it's a community of resistance, of deep solidarity, and of people who refuse to disappear.
That is a really helpful description. And it's even making me think about, what I experienced when I was there. I had the opportunity to spend a morning farming with the community, picking potatoes, harvesting potatoes. And I remember after farming, we took a break and we had lunch. But to get to the place where we had lunch, we drove along the border of the community. And it was really interesting to notice, one, I think the heavily militarized presence. So there were soldiers just on the outside of the community, but also you mentioned rapid urban development, that there are these suburbs right across on the other side of the road that are slowly taking over the farmland. But I think this point that you bring up about the struggle of the farmers, that they're not passive to this, is an important point. And it takes me to my next question, which is really a question about justice and about hope. Can you talk a little bit about how your work with the farmers, your immersion in this community, shaped your conception of justice and hope?
My pakikipamuhay or immersion in Lupang Ramos really reshaped how I understand both justice and hope. Before that experience, I often understood justice in a more abstract way, something we talk about in theology or something we hope will come in the future. But among the farmers, justice became very concrete. It is something that must take root in the land itself, in people's lives, and in the conditions they are struggling in every day. And at the same time, hope also took on a completely different meaning for me. The farmers taught me that hope is not a feeling they wait to have, or it is not optimism about outcomes, and it is not a certainty that justice will come. So I have written in my essay, hope is when they still wake up in the morning. They wake up knowing their land is under threat. They wake up knowing their harvest can be destroyed, and yet they still rise. They return to the land and they continue to till and care for it. And so I began to understand hope as a form of resistance, resistance against the forces that have the power to take everything away. So for the farmers in Lupang Ramos, the land is their life and their home, and hope is their way of holding on to it. Hope became something like a discipline, a daily decision to continue, to keep going, and to care for life even in the middle of uncertainty. And if I may add, I came to understand that hope is not what comes after struggle. It is what allows people to hold on to their humanity within it.
This grounded hope that emerges from kind of inside the conditions of exploitation and conditions of oppression, these conditions of violation. I think what it also names is the relationship between hope and agency and freedom, that freedom is not taken away, and that it's precisely in these actions that we can begin to not only imagine a different kind of world, but actually to build and act towards one. So you are no longer immersing with Lupang Ramos. You're now here in the United States in a very different context. You're in the Midwest. You're in Chicagoland. How does the hope that you learned among the farmers in Lupang Ramos, among the Salakot, how is that shaping hope in this new context here in the U.S.?
It's been almost 2 years since I left home, Colton, and and even though I'm no longer physically in Lupang Ramos, what I learned there continues to shape how I understand and practice hope today. The context here in the United States is different, but the reality of struggle is still very present. As I pastor a Filipino congregation, I witness the struggles our kababayans carry every day. Tired bodies from long hours of work, the unequal treatment many immigrants face, and the constant fear of deportation simply because how they are perceived or where they come from. I also see the emotional and spiritual weight they carry. The pressure to provide for families back home, or the loneliness of being far from home, and the resilience it takes just to keep going each day. And as a student, I hear the stories of international students who are not simply studying, but struggling to survive, working multiple jobs, navigating financial pressures, and living with uncertainty about their future when they should be able to flourish and grow. So what Lupang Ramos taught me is that hope does not depend on stability or certainty. It is something we practice every day. It shows up in how we remain present, how we listen, and how we commit ourselves to people and communities, especially in the midst of uncertainty. The farmers taught me that, again, hope is a form of resistance, and I carry that with me here. It means refusing indifference, refusing to turn away from injustice, and choosing to stand with people, to listen to their stories, to walk with them in their struggles, and to remain present even when change is slow or uncertain. And so I carry their stories with me and share wherever I go. They have taught me something that is deeply liberating, not just for individuals, but for entire communities. They have shown me that hope can be practiced, that dignity can be defended, and that even in the midst of uncertainty, people can continue to choose life. So even though I'm no longer in Lupang Ramos, the hope I learned there continues to guide me as a daily practice of showing up, standing with others, and choosing to care.
Thank you, Hazel. I think this is a great place to end.
Thank you, Colton.